This episode has been brought to you by CompleteNutra.com, Whole Family Nutrition.
I say that, and I know that means so many different things to so many different people. When I say that, I'm talking Jesus. But also, when I say Jesus, I don't know what people think about. They might think about war, Christian, Catholic Church, like control, politics. People think they don't like Jesus because of all these things that other people have put on to Jesus.
Yeah. So I like to take a bit of a C.S. Lewis approach. C.S. Lewis was a great scholar of the mid-20th century, and he has a book. He wrote the Chronicles of Narnia, and you're familiar with a lot of it.
Definitely.
But in his book, Mere Christianity, what he tries to do is kind of bring Christianity in the person of Jesus, to the nub. Who is he, and what was his message really about? And, I think that that's a very healthy approach. And the way I look at it is on the center of the page, who Jesus is and what he's about is really clear. And the further you go from the center to the edges of the page, the more you get into some interesting questions. And I think it's fair to discuss those things. But Jesus really clearly claimed to be the one who came to fulfill the ancient promise of God all the way back in Genesis 3:15, after Adam and Eve fell into sin and alienated themselves from God. And if you think about that, if you alienate yourself from the source of life, that's going to mess you up, right?
Absolutely.
And so mankind was really jacked up, and that's where evil comes from, and all those sorts of things, pain and suffering and death and even bodily dysfunction, because we became alienated from ourselves. As well as from one another, as well as from the rest of creation.
Wow.
And so God promises in Genesis 3:15, he's going to send a champion, a Messiah, also in Greek, that's Christ, to destroy the works of the devil, conquer the power of sin, lift us from our fall, and restore to us life as it was meant to be in and under him. That's really the seminal promise in the Old Testament. And the Old Testament is all about just unfolding that promise until you come to the Gospels, where we find Jesus, who in his very first utterance says, hey, the kingdom has come. Basically, because I, the king, have come. The promised new covenant kingdom has come, and I'm about to make it happen. And then so Jesus lives the perfect life that we don't live, and he talks about what life was meant to be. For example, in the Sermon on the Mount. I know you're a big Sermon on the Mount fan.
I've been reading it in the last week. It's really, really great. The more I read it,
But it's challenging too, and it's
challenging.
Kind of like, it's like a gut punch at the same time.
Yeah,
or like a really intense chiropractic visit.
It's really deep.
Adjust.
And I read it in every version. If you go Amplified or Student Bible, and if you go the Message, and if you go King James, kind of give it all the versions. Boy, it is really interesting.
Yeah. So he lays out what life in the restored kingdom would look like, or life what it was meant to be in and under God would feel like, and how we relate to ourselves, how we relate to God, how we relate to one another.
It's like rules for life. It's like if someone's like, nobody ever told me what to do here in life. Well, this is Jesus is like, this is exactly what you should do.
It's exactly right. And what's really interesting about the Sermon on the Mount is it begins with what is called the Beatitudes. The Latin beatus means virtue. That begins with what kind of a person you are that lives this kind of life. And what's fascinating is he starts off by saying that the greatest virtue we can have is the knowledge that we are unable to live rightly apart from God's grace because we've rebelled against him. We need his help. We need to be reconnected to him so that he can live in and through us. So it's not like Jesus says, I'm just going to give you a new ethic to follow. He says, hey, you were created for a relationship with God. You rebelled against that relationship. Here's what life is supposed to look like. Let me bring you back there by living the perfect life you don't live. And here's what's fascinating. He predicted and pulled off his own death and resurrection from the dead, through which he would cancel our sins that separated us from God in order to bring us back into a right relationship with God. And through his resurrection, he brings us newness of life so that we can begin to live out the life we were created to live in and under him.
Wow.
And that's really who Jesus is, why he came, and what Christianity is in a nutshell.
That's interesting because I did just get the question from a friend of mine, really great friend of mine. He asked me, what's the different, what do you think about the other ascended masters? And because he kind of says like, Jesus a lot of time is put in the same category with other ascended masters is what people are calling them, like Buddha, Krishna, or whoever people consider ascended masters.
Sure.
So what would you say, like, how is Jesus different from, it's kind of what you just said, but how is Jesus different from other ascended masters?
Well, I would say he's the only one of the ascended masters that actually ascended.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Why do you say that?
He literally rose bodily from the dead, and historical evidence for this is just overwhelming. So that unless you begin with the assumption that such a thing simply won't happen, then you'd have to conclude it did. And I have a podcast called Theotalk. It's really a vlog, I guess, and I'm talking about that in a series now called Undeniable Realities: Why I'm a Christian. I'm actually on that particular episode on evidence for the resurrection. It's just profound.
Wow.
And so the difference is that Jesus actually rose from the dead, thereby proving everything else he said and did was true, and that his sacrifice was acceptable to God the Father, so that in fact he accomplished what he came to do, to bring us wholeness with God, that brings us wholeness with ourselves, one another, and the rest of creation. And that's why I said, if I can loop all the way back, that this is the foundation of everything. This is the fountain of every other component of life. You have to start down there in order for it to spring up into all the different aspects of living, if that's a analogy.
Yeah. I remember you talking about vertical first before horizontal. I mean, there's that one Hoosier song, that song like, take me to church, I'll worship like a dog at the shrine of your lies. The interesting part about that song is it sounds like a gospel song, but he's basically saying he will worship the woman at the shrine of her lies is the lyrics, right?
Yeah.
And I will tell you my sins as you sharpen the knife. That's the other lyric, right? So it's just people, I think that song did really well because I think there's an innate, maybe part of our fallen nature that wants to be worshiped. And like, I think sometimes we fall in a trap relationally to find a person, and in a relationship, we accidentally start worshiping that other person, or the other person starts worshiping us. And it actually never feels great to be the worshiper or the worshipee of a relationship. I think
so good.
That's why a lot of relationships don't work. In my past, it's kind of what's happened, and I've had to learn. I'm still learning how to become the person before I really take that next step.
Me too.
Awesome.
What's interesting is none of us were made to be worshipped. We were made to worship. And so that's a great point you made, Dave. The reason we don't feel good as worshipers of other people is that we know they're other people, and we know they're not really worthy of our worship. They're going to let us down. They do let us down, and then we're dashed. And on the other hand, it's scary to be worshipped because we realize just
I'm gonna let people down sometimes. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Wow.
Thank you for joining us for the Healthy and Family Show. Visit our website at healthyandfamily.com. That's healthyandfamily.com to see what all the other doctors, experts, and real moms have to say about keeping your whole family healthy. This episode has been brought to you by CompleteNutro.com, Whole Family Nutrition, and aired on the Goldstone Network. People, Planet, Future.